Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, and we're here for another episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, here on the Coalition Radio Network. I'm your host, Chaz Calenda, and I'm an attorney at the law firm of Inman and Torgy in Coventry, Rhode Island. And as always tonight, as we always do, we are going to be talking about issues affecting us here in Rhode Island, and particularly the COVID-19 state of emergency, which is now entering year 2. And as always, we'll be keeping the law above politics. With me tonight are station management of the Coalition Radio Network, Pat Ford, and owner of the Brood Awakenings Coffee House, Dave LeVake. I thank you both for joining me tonight, and I appreciate you guys being on the show.
No problem.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Well, thanks for joining us. And so I assume we're all going to put on our masks now because we are entering year 2 of our imminent peril of state of emergency here in the state of Rhode Island. And we're putting on our masks, and because we know that masks work, right? Isn't that what we were told by Dr. Alexander Scott?
Yes, I'm
today?
putting on my mask. Can you see? I put my mask on.
Well, I've heard that it can enter through your eyes, so I'm glad you've got yourself covered there, Pat.
I'm looking directly into the sun. Nothing will go wrong. I'm doing as I'm told.
It's a perfect fit.
Do what you're told, Pat, because I can tell you right now from having the experience going through the process with the Max Fitness clubs last year during the quote-unquote pause, the Department of Health will be coming after people. There is no question, even though Governor McKee tried to downplay that during his press conference today about what the possible ramifications would be if for those businesses who are non-compliant. I'm just looking at Pat and dying over here.
What's the problem? I'm following orders. Masks work.
It's it is very clear that the Department of Health will be using the same enforcement mechanisms that they tried to use against other businesses last year during the pause. So we are at the point where we were last year, except we shouldn't be here. As far as I can tell, we have vaccines, we have treatments, we have all sorts of things that we can do to combat the COVID-19 variant, and all the Greek alphabet letters equivalents with it. But we are back to now mandating businesses impose mask and vaccine requirements and verification of vaccine requirements before people are allowed into the business. Dave, as a business owner,
I've washed my hands. I'm wearing my mask. What else must I do?
Did you take your temperature?
I will go take my temperature now. Thank you.
Have you donated?
Well, yeah. So, Dave, as a business owner, how did this affect you the first time this happened last year when then Governor Raimondo ordered the pause and all the restrictions that the business had to go through?
I can see.
And now, how do you expect this to? And how do you expect this to affect you going forward on Monday when these new restrictions take place?
Well, the first time it was obviously devastating, not only to me, but to all businesses, but restaurants especially. You have loss of restaurants, which we've lost. You have some restaurants that haven't rebounded at this point. We've lost our employment staff of 120 people used to be at. Now we're down to, I think, 70. That hasn't changed. I've been saying for a year and a half that it wasn't going to change based on the restrictions and ridiculous things that they put in play for many reasons. So it's been, in the past, was very devastating, which has continued to go on. It hasn't stopped. It's also caused not only me, but many other owners to have to jump in just to keep your businesses afloat and do jobs and things that you normally didn't have to do, that you hired other people to do in the past. So that part, it's a continuing problem that hasn't gone away. Now to come out and say, hey, we're going to have new mask mandates on Monday, and if you don't have them, you're in trouble, or start some sort of battle or litigation, that's just going to be another problem. I think just by opening up that segment today with him mentioning that has probably put a lot of people off the market to go spend money. Who's going to go running out thinking they're going to have to now battle, someone question whether they have a mask or they've been vaccinated. They're not going to want to go through that. So I think it's going to hinder business. One, and two, it's trying to force a new mandate on existing businesses to regulate what individuals should be doing. People should have personal freedoms. It's not up to a business owner to be questioned whether Chaz or Pat Ford has a mask or has been vaccinated. It's not what we should be doing, and it's not what we're going to be doing.
Dave, are you and your employees over at Brood Awakenings, are they trained in detecting whether or not a vaccine passport is a valid passport?
The answer to that is no. And we like to stick to things that we're trained on and that we know. We're not going to venture out and try to do things that we have not been trained on or practiced in the past. So we'll sell you a cup of coffee and make you a sandwich.
And it's quite good. I'll give you that. Your coffee and sandwiches and foods are quite good. I'll give you that. But your ability to detect a fake vaccine passport, I'm not sure. I have no idea, and I wouldn't think that someone in your position would want to be in that position of having to determine whether or not somebody is showing you valid credentials. I thought we as a country were not about that, but we're finding out more and more every day that what we're about here and what our leaders here, particularly in Rhode Island, are willing to put us through, put our business owners through, put the patrons, consumers through, put individuals through. And I think we're at a tipping point here, because I'll tell you, I don't think I've seen a day. I don't think I've seen a day like this where I had so many phone calls, so many social media outreaches to me personally as an attorney about what are we going to do about this? What can be done about this? That I had today, and it's people will say, "Oh, good for you, you're busy." I'm glad I'm busy, but these are things that are affecting real people. These are things that are affecting people's real lives or livelihoods. And, to have to deal and talk to people and explain to them what's going on and the feeling of hopelessness that I get from a lot of people who have called or reached out to me is palpable. And, I don't know that I'd want to be in a position where I was, being forced to comply with those mandates, or have been put in a position where I had to make a choice. So, I mean, Pat, as a former head of the Libertarian Party, what are your thoughts on going backwards, as I would call it, in this situation?
From a technical perspective, and here's the problem: the state has lost credibility at every step of this by misinformation, disinformation, lack of information. And quite frankly, as we discovered in the case with the parents' union, complete lies, that there's simply no trust whatsoever in state officials. And that's a very dangerous place, because ultimately in this culture, and I clearly disagree with the state we're in, but in this culture we largely look to government officials for what to do in times of crisis. And that link, that social structure has been destroyed, because no one believes anybody anymore. When I ask for justification about masking, what's the response I get? We joke about it, but it's horrific. Masks work. Okay.
Right.
Why do masks work? How do masks work? Nothing.
Yeah, and Pat, I want to get to that, and I want to get to that right now if we can, because that was the response that was given to you by the director of the Department of Health when you asked her, have you looked into the efficacy of what does masking actually work, and she just simply gave you the standard answer, because why are we doing this? Because they work. Well, I'd like to point out something it's on the Cato Institute. It's being published on the Cato Institute website, cato.org, but it's actually a study, and I'm just going to read it just so this wasn't done by the Cato Institute. They're just publishing it, but it's a study by an Ian Liu, who's a student, medical student at the University of Colorado, and a public health student at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and a lawyer from New York University. Vinay Prasad, who's also a practicing hematologist and oncologist, an associate professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of California in San Francisco. Jonathan Darrow is an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and an associate scientist in the Division of Pharmacoepidemiology and Pharmacoeconomics in the Department of Medicine. And this is an article that deals with the lack of mask effectiveness and the lack of a firm foundation to show that they work. So they actually talk about it, that there were actually, where was it? I believe it was 14 randomized controlled mask tests to determine whether or not masks were able to control the spread of the COVID-19. And only 2 studies, sizable studies, in evaluating masks in the context of COVID-19 failed to demonstrate statistically significant reductions in confirmed viral transmission, either for surgical masks or for cloth masks. This is a study by legitimate people, legitimate scientists, legitimate epidemiologists, which is what Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott claims she is. And I don't know where she's getting her information from, because randomized controlled studies, according to their own person, I believe it was Dr. McDonald who testified in the parents' case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but I believe it was Dr. McDonald who said the randomized controlled studies are the gold standard when it comes to research. Am I wrong?
That's the mantra that they project constantly.
And these randomized controlled studies have failed to show that, quote unquote, masks work, as Dr. Scott has repeatedly said. Dave, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah. A good friend of mine, a doctor friend of mine, sent me a couple things today, and one of them about the mask was one of the largest real-world studies that demonstrated that masks were only 9% effective in reducing the real-world spread of COVID-19. That study was done in Bangladesh, where they followed some 340,000 people. It doesn't help. Now, does that mean that somebody wearing a mask can't stop something? No, of course there's a little percentage of it. But you got people touching masks, handling masks. It's on their visor. They go out and have spaghetti and pasta over at Capriccio's, and they're having coffee at Brit Awakenings. And tomorrow they get the same mask on they had on for the following week. You can't tell me that these people have a mask that's actually going to be valid in stopping the spread of anything. It's just not realistic that masks are going to help any of us stop this spread. We got no wide breakouts in restaurants in Rhode Island. There's no one particular restaurant or 2 particular restaurants you can look at and say, hey, because they're unmasked or they're not vaccinated, that's where it's coming from. It's just not realistic. And I think this whole thing was brought on to us today about a hospital staffing issue, which is the problem, which that was a man-made event. We could have avoided that by not pushing people off the workforce. So now we're going to go put the burden on the businesses. You know, the death rate this year compared to last year at the same time period is 7 times lower. We've made progress. We've got through it. Follow personal hygiene. Stay home if you're not sick. If the hospitals are overwhelmed, well, then let's stop having people go there for things that they don't need to go to. The message from the governor today and everybody else should have been, listen, let's not go to the hospitals unless it's an absolute necessity. You know, don't get that arm surgery. Put off that hip surgery right now. You know, don't go get your eyes done or whatever it might be. So you can use the resources for what you need them for. That's a common sense approach. But to tell Pat that he's got to wear the mask over his face, the face diaper, that's ridiculous.
Well, and that's a very valid point. You know, they used the hospital staffing justification as one of the major points for why they have to do this, and that was largely a self-inflicted wound by the state of Rhode Island, because they imposed these requirements, these vaccine requirements on our healthcare workers, many of whom had a legitimate medical or religious objection or a problem with getting the vaccine, and those people were fired. And in fact, The state hospital, it was Eleanor Slater, I believe it was, the state hospital was exempted from the vaccine requirement after they reached critical staffing levels because they simply just could not function at the levels they were going to be at with the loss of the staff. And that's true for all hospitals going on right now. And it's not just simply because people were fired, it's also just because we were already at critical shortage levels within our hospitals, and that just exacerbated it. So now we're here, the rest of us again, business owners, individuals are going to be paying for that very deliberate decision by the governor and by the Department of Health, paying for that by going through yet another holiday season where we have these restrictions in place. Granted, they're not telling everyone to shut down, but there's going to be certainly, we talked about it, Dave, there's going to certainly be ramifications for businesses from a financial standpoint and from an operations standpoint, because people are unfortunately going to be deterred by these restrictions that they're putting in place.
Dave,
that's correct.
You're uniquely connected to restaurants around Rhode Island. By the way, just for the record, I wanted to say that the 260, and we'll be pushing more video on this from today's events tomorrow morning, but the $260,000 a year head of the Rhode Island Hospitality Organization was sitting there in support of Governor McKee right up front in a prominent position, and when asked after the meeting if she had any issues, she fled the room, which I find astonishing. You had a number of people who were there from business organizations, the Federal Hill Organization, the Small Business Coalition. They were there to make their point, to protest politely, but with a great sense of authority. And the head of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association was there in support of this. I find that astonishing. Is she...
And Pat...
Go ahead, buddy.
And Pat, and I think to your point on that, last year, when you remember when I was handling the Max Fitness case, I pointed out that one of the reasons why some of the businesses and the Hospitality Association were not subject to the same restrictions that my gym was because the Hospitality Association, which I believe was still led by the same individual that it is now, basically bragged in the press of their access to then Governor Raimondo during the negotiations of what was going to happen during that pause. And it seems like the head of the Hospitality Association, at least the leadership of it, has the same kind of insider access to Governor McKee that they had during the Raimondo administration. That to me reeks of arbitrariness, favoritism, whatever you want to call it. Am I off base with that conclusion?
Dave, what do you think?
Well, I think it's incompetence. She shouldn't be in that position. She should be defending restaurants. There's no reason why restaurants should be forced to try to hold up this mandate and police the public on safety issues like this. And for her to stand there and support it is ridiculous. She's obviously there for other reasons. I think anybody that's in that association is wasting their money to be paying her that kind of money for what little support I see her give to the restaurant industry is just a waste of time. It's a shame. It really is a shame. She should have stood up and defended the restaurant's ability to fight off this mask mandate, not stand there and support it behind the governor. To me, it looks like she's obviously trying to vow for another position and have political incited, aspirations or something.
Yeah, her entire focus appears to be to maintain her position in the power firmament. And what was equally, I'm going to word this carefully, what was equally disturbing was the members of the media who went to pay her homage. And that was disturbing because she is a disturbing force. I believe that and I've asked a number of times to go on the record and tell us what they've done during the mandate, during the pandemic, during all of these events, and all I've gotten so far was a blanket drive, and they help facilitate heaters for outdoor restaurant use. That's about it. Just a non-entity. and again, when you look at the folks at the Federal Hill Association who found a way to be professionally provocative and advocate for their folks, it even makes it a more stark reality. There are people like her, like the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, like Crossroads, like all of these organizations who are more intent on maintaining their fat salaries. And I mean, we're talking $200,000 to $300,000 a year in compensation. We're not talking, these aren't pikers, baby. They're far more focused on maintaining their position in the power structure of Rhode Island than they are at all on advocating on behalf of, in this case, of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, Providence businesses, statewide businesses, or in the Rhode Island Rhode Island Hospitality Association. The other folks aren't so great either. The Rhode Island hospitality people who seem to flit between meeting and meeting, making sure that they've got their power purse and their power clipboard. And I don't know, Dave, you got to tell me, you're a restaurant guy. What do they do all day there?
I don't know what they do all day there. I think you hit it on nail on the head. They gave out some blankets and some heaters to preferred restaurants. I sure as hell didn't see them stand up defending all restaurants, and that's what they should be doing. So I don't know. All I know is that when you put on these restrictions, these mandates, and you try to have the businesses, the restaurants perform this task or go under this type of scrutiny, there's a lot of stress. We're already taxed. We're short-staffed. You're running out of resources. People are running out of their PPP money or whatever benefits and programs they could have signed on to are winding down. You got minimum wage about to go up. I think January 1st, it goes to $12.25, a 75-cent raise to individuals. How much taxing of a business can you do? Listen, the businesses are the ones that supply the jobs, which allow the states and cities and towns in order to survive. Why are you putting all this pressure on the businesses? How about get out there and support them? I don't hear anything coming out of anybody in this government about let's get back to work. There's no more collecting. There'll be no more handouts. You need a handout? First go show us you have a job. And if that's not enough, show us you got a second job. And then if that's not enough, if you're spending your money wisely, now we'll help you. We don't have that. We got no message like that coming out.
To answer the question you just kind of posed over there is why are they going after the businesses is because they have the regulatory scheme to go after the businesses. From a legal standpoint, it's a lot harder to go after individuals who maybe walk into your store without a mask or without the vaccine proof. It's a lot harder to go after them as individuals, but it's a lot easier for the Department of Health or the Department of Business Regulation to go after your license to operate as a business, because they can just have their administrative hearing and there you go. You get your notice of violation, your compliance order, you refuse to comply. They go to court, they get an injunction. We've seen it over and over again. That's why they're using businesses to further this agenda, because it's an easier way for them to legally to use the legal system to enforce it, I should say. And that's a terrible burden to put upon business owners at this point, considering that it's going to take, if you have enforcement action taken against you, it's going to take thousands and thousands of dollars and potentially years to fight off that action.
Yep. Is that the type of leadership you want in our state? Is that the people you want to be, rallying under or behind? Not me.
It's not certainly not what it's not certainly not what I stand for. I was hoping in 2019, when our current Attorney General took office, that he would be that independent check and balance on the rest of our state, that, he had the ability to do so. He has not only not been that, he has been the rubber stamp for the state and all their enforcement mechanisms. He's been the one with the Department of Health going after the businesses and the individuals and everybody else enforcing these mandates, acting more as the governor's attorney as opposed to the people's attorney. And so we really have effectively no checks and balances. The General Assembly is absolutely absent the small number of members of the GOP caucus who have stood up vocally and opposed these measures and said the General Assembly needs to act. But where's the rest of the General Assembly? Why is this a partisan issue? The General Assembly has the authority to stop this in its tracks tonight. They could go there, both houses, the House and the Senate, could vote concurrently by a majority vote and say, you know what? I think 2 years is long enough to be in a state of emergency. The governor's declaration is over. They haven't done it. And not only haven't they done it, they haven't said anything about it. So, I mean, they're trying to shirk their political liability, any sort of political liability by staying quiet. They should not be allowed to stay quiet any longer. Put them on the record. Vote up or down. Vote up or down, and you either say, yes, Governor, we agree with what you're doing, or no, Governor, we don't agree with what you're doing, and it comes to an end. But make them get on the record, and then in November, everybody who has something to say about this can go to the ballot box and vote accordingly based on what they believe how they've been represented by our leaders in this state. If anyone disagrees with that, I'm happy to have a discussion about that.
Now, I think that's an excellent segue, Chaz, to talk about what I always lovingly refer to as the Globo Gym exercise. And of course, I'm talking about Max Fitness, Mr. Matt D'Amico, who's been on the show a number of times and owns a business that's based in Connecticut, but has, I believe, 2 outlets here in Rhode Island, one in Warren, I believe one in the greater Lincoln area. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And all in all, runs a reputable, high-performing, community-friendly gym franchise. And right now, shocking, right? When I asked the governor this afternoon, not in the press conference because they didn't have time for me and a few other people who have been persistent presence at the press conferences.
I did notice.
But if he was aware of this situation, of course he claimed not to be, which is, I believe, balderdash. But it proves effectively, in my humble opinion, that there's no effective, if you will, there's really no way to force businesses to comply with this if they so choose. So maybe can you bring us through that whole exercise? Excuse me. You were the attorney, and you brought me up to date this week on a rather stunning result, which shockingly, again, the Rhode Island Health Department, which is so press friendly and so eager to make their claim, hasn't gotten around to mentioning.
Well, I am the attorney for Max Fitness, and as you remember, last year they were subject to a restraining order because they had allegedly remained open during the so-called pause. And, although that restraining order was dissolved shortly after the pause, the case itself in the Superior Court remained open and kind of dormant at that point. And going forward, nothing had happened, but we did not move to dismiss the case because they hadn't served anybody. We could have, but I knew in the back of my mind that eventually the Department of Health would be coming forward and looking for those $5,000 plus fines that they had tried to assess and asked for against Max Fitness. And lo and behold, in November, I get a notice from the Department of Health and the Department of Administration that they are instituting administrative proceedings to collect those $5,000 plus fines from my client, Max Fitness, even though they had already asked for them in the Superior Court prayer for relief in their lawsuit. So immediately I filed a counterclaim in answer to their lawsuit, which had been dormant for a year. And at that point, the case can no longer be unilaterally dismissed in the Superior Court without agreement of both parties. And I got an immediate call from a member of the Attorney General's office seeking, my input as to how can we resolve this case. My answer was simply the Department of Health can withdraw their fines and stop their administrative proceedings, or we're going to court and we're going to fight this out in the Superior Court where you, the state of Rhode Island, and the Department of Health chose to take the battle. A day later, we had an agreement that the Department of Health would withdraw all administrative proceedings, forfeit their ability to go forward and collect any fines, and that case has now been dismissed and settled, and all claims have been released, and my client is free and clear of those $5,000 worth of fines.
Now, I'm just thinking, if they thought they could have won their case, they would have persisted, wouldn't they?
Usually, yes. Now I will be, to be completely transparent. The law since and the orders since the pause have changed, but at the same time, we are going to litigate the law as it was at the time of the pause. So perhaps they were not very sure that that would have survived judicial scrutiny. Although I don't know, but I think that we had a very strong argument, counterclaim in that case, to fight against what they were doing. And, I haven't seen the Department of Health back down very many times when they're going after these businesses, because they were going after them for a long time, and they did back down in this particular case. And I was happy to get my client a good result in that matter.
Now, let's look at the situation right now. Chaz, can you break out the requirements that are being placed upon businesses, and then tell us about the state's ability to enforce them?
So basically, for businesses, any business that has the capacity of up to 250 people to hold the indoors 250 people have two options. They can either require people to mask or require proof of vaccination and therefore not have to make them mask. Now, obviously, a private business is able to say, I want everybody to mask anyway, but they give those businesses under 250 people a capacity a choice. If you're a business over 250 capacity, or a large public venue that has ability to have more than 250 people there, then everybody is required to mask, regardless of their vaccination status. And the enforcement mechanism, like it was for my client Max Fitness, would be through an administrative hearing at the Department of Health when they issue a citation, or they can simply go to the Superior Court and seek an injunction, and ask the court to require you to comply with their orders when they issue you a compliance order that you don't comply with. And that will be what they will do. They will go after the businesses, because they know the businesses are where they can yank licenses, they can prevent them from operating, and they can make their lives basically a living hell.
And of course, even if you're successful in defending them, the legal fees can be onerous. Mr. D'Amico, like a number of local business people, is uniquely committed to both to his business and to supporting, let's put it this way, supporting liberties, and are in a unique position in being able to defend, if you will, their philosophical objections to this. This is not for the meek or the mild. But ultimately, in both of your opinions, I'll throw this out to both of you, is there a case to be made for civil disobedience and simply refusing to comply?
Yeah,
as yes.
As far as it's a risk, it's a risk that any business owner is going to have to evaluate. It has to evaluate and decide whether or not the risk is worth the possible reward there. Dave, you could speak better to that.
Yeah, well, I have no intentions of making any changes to what we do. We're already sanitizing, cleaning, washing hands more than ever before. We installed automated faucets on every sink, so you don't even have to touch a sink to transmit something. We don't allow anybody to come into work that's ill or sick. If we find out somebody's ill or sick, we send them home. We're doing everything we need to do in order to keep our business safe for both our patrons and our employees. So that we're not making any more changes. We're not going to start mandating checks and masks, because first of all, it doesn't solve anything, doesn't do anything. It's just going to deter us from doing what we should be doing anyways. There's also no resources assigned for us to be able to do that. Never mind, it's an infringement on somebody's rights. So we'll continue to operate the way we're going to operate. If some reason we end up in a battle with the health department or somebody else from the state or some agency, well, then I'm going to be calling Chaz Calenda, and we're going to be defending that case and moving forward. But there's probably maybe a dozen or two restaurants that already called me up today that they're not compliant. They're going to do everything they've been doing all along, which is the right thing to do. It's not our fault that you understaff the hospitals. It's not our fault that your ridiculous rules and procedures over the last 2 years have devastated businesses and the economy. We're just strictly trying to follow the new procedures and rules that we had to put in place just to survive. The cost of business already is devastating. Expenses, gas, utilities, food costs, employee costs. I just mentioned the labor rate going up in just a few weeks. There's no extra resources to put toward this to try to mandate a checkpoint with everybody coming through the door, and then never mind the battles that you'd have to be getting in with people, and then you're too close to them anyway. So now you violated the 6-foot space because you have to deck somebody at the door. So we're gonna continue to do what we've been doing all along, and many other businesses. Like I said earlier, there are no outbreaks in restaurants. You're not seeing a restaurant close down because someone wasn't vaccinated or somebody's not wearing a mask. I mean, it's just not practical. So I think there's a lot of double talk coming out of the office up there and what they're doing, and I think me and a lot of other restaurants are going to hang strong, and we'll see where it rolls.
Dave,
And Pat,
I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Chaz.
No, I was going to ask you, Pat. Isn't civil disobedience kind of a hallmark of the freedoms of this country? It's kind of been a staple in our long history as to how people show their displeasure with government overreach.
Everything about this stinks when you look at it through the prism of our American Revolution. We threw out England for a lot less than that. And of course, people are saying, well, it's just an inconvenience. Why are you so fixated on this? Well, I wanted to ask Dave, perhaps, and this is hard. The analogy I often draw when government or people get involved in tinkering with these things is, the Massachusetts weatherman, right? You guys have heard me say that 100 times. Tuesday or Wednesday comes around, it's summertime in Boston, and the weather guy comes up and says there's a 30% chance of rain in Cape Cod. Well, guess what that does to Cape Cod? It pretty much shuts it down. No one's going out there for the weekend, and no one's going to participate. Dave, you've spent a lifetime building businesses and restaurants at a serious level, and that's not to diminish any people who have these small delis and these small cafes that are really fixtures and make life so wonderful here in Rhode Island. But you work at a near institutional level. You've got multiple locations. At times, when you'll be able to hire people, hundreds of employees. The first time you and I, Dave, ever had a conversation on the air, the first thing I asked you was, how many folks had their first job working at Brood Awakenings? How many high school juniors, fresh out of their working papers, had their first job, and you trained them how to work in the real world? So if you can walk us through the process that you think goes through people's minds, all right, when they're interpreting whether to go out or not, and how these idiot mandates impact the decision-making process, and what impact that has on the chance that on the way home they're going to stop at a Brood and sit down and have a quiet cappuccino, maybe with a sandwich, maybe with one of your great desserts, maybe with a cocktail. How does this impact that whole process where somebody says, hey, let's stop at Brood? Talk to me about that.
Well, most people don't want to be confrontational. Most people want to go out, have a good time, grab a drink, have a coffee with somebody, swing into a location and do some work or whatever it might be. When you start throwing mandates down like this, the only thing you're going to do is invite confrontation, and that's just going to deter people. One of the first calls I got was from someone who was not vaccinated, has no intentions of being vaccinated, had COVID, has the antibodies, all the natural immunity, is against mask mandates. And the first thing that she said was, I'll get all my work done between now and Sunday, and I don't plan on going to another restaurant or out shopping until this is over, because I just don't want to deal with the BS. So you're going to have people like that you just take right out of the market, right out of the playing game, the playing field. And then you're going to have the other people on the other side that are for mask mandates or for vaccines. And if they don't see that you're following it or understand that you're following it, they're not going to come in because they think you're an enemy. You're the bad guy. So just having chatter like this has probably already knocked off 10, 15, 20% of the market force just in Rhode Island for going out. There's no help. This did not help us during this time, for Christmas and holidays and New Year's. This message today is a devastating message. And you're right, it's a lot of work. There are hundreds and thousands of people that we've employed and taught and brought up, tens of thousands of customers a week that we wait on and deal with. And now you get thrown another challenge like this, curveball. It's not pro-business. It's not helpful. I don't know where these guys are getting their information from. I don't know who they're talking to. But let me just tell you, without businesses, without the public spending money, we ain't going anywhere. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a bigger issue than most people thought about.
Right.
Financially.
No, absolutely. And that's why, Dave, we look to you so often for comments about the business community, because how could I put this? When you reach a certain critical mass in terms of the size of a business, the mechanics of how people look at your business, how they interact with your business, the size of the average ticket of what they spend with your business, that's when you move beyond the primary startup phase of a restaurant, where it's so much is a function of the quality of the food. When you get to multiple locations, you've got so many moving parts that can wipe out a day, wipe out an afternoon. A catering order that comes in that doesn't go well, right? Can absorb your entire staff. The ability to staff all these locations. It's so complex and so interrelated, and it's a key factor on why so many businesses in what we'll look back someday and say in normal times, and I don't know what those are anymore, but back in the day, back in 2019, the year of our Lord, when life was it was a simpler time back then, right? Where all you had to worry about was making sure people showed up for work on time, and making sure the place was clean, and turning out a quality product. Now, you've introduced a whole set of variables that clearly elude the grasp of our salons, our great leaders, because, and I'll come back to this time and time again, none of them have ever actually run a business, no matter what they say. And when they talk about running a business, they're talking about their law practice, which, again, God bless people who have law practice, Chad. It's a sophisticated business, but has none of the variables of running a restaurant, never mind a chain of restaurants. And let's be blunt, it's these larger organizations throughout the state that are privately held that are paying a disproportionate share of the taxes in this state. So right now, everybody's flush, right? We got the $600 million surplus. We got the $1.7 billion lodge. We got the highway money. We got all sorts of money coming in. That's going to last. The way this state works, that's going to go way faster than the tobacco settlement. I'm convinced that the larger the pot, the more pigs are at the trough. And we're going to see a transition in the coming months away from what's left of a private economy to a complete state-sponsored economy, and then we will collapse. We will have more money than ever right before we functionally collapse as a working economy than anybody in recent memory. It's going to be a pretty deep dive. I mean, do you guys think I'm full of it? Do you think I'm just imagining?
No, I
don't.
It seems
I think
like
you're
a
right on.
realistic possibility.
What happens after the checks stop coming from D.C.? What happens as inflation continues to climb because we're simply printing money and we're not engaging in any real wealth creation?
We're looking at it.
I'm astonished.
We're looking at it.
So it is the official editorial. I've consulted station management here. It is the official editorial position of the Coalition Radio Network that if upon personal reflection of your own circumstances, that if possible, you should not support any of this. Leave folks up to their own individual decisions as to which they wish to participate in your business. And if you're a business that chooses to support this, that's fine. Those folks, they're making their own decisions. But ultimately, this is what it's all about. Folks reacting to their own personal values, their own personal businesses, their own personal decisions, and having the right to comply or not. And I would argue that you deserve nothing but the support of the community if you choose not to comply. Dave, are you going to comply at any level?
That's a negative. We are going to hold strong for what we've been doing. We will not ask a single person to show a vaccination card. We will not ask a single person to put a mask on or take one off. You do as you wish as you walk through the door. We will continue to do all the great things we've been doing and keeping our places clean, making sure our staff is healthy. And when they're not, we'll make sure they have the adequate time off to take, and we'll help them any way we possibly can financially by getting them shifts at other times throughout the month so they can meet their obligations. But we are not going to be mandating masks. We're not going to be asking people. We're not going to be policing this. I hope there's a lot of people that stand with me, but you won't see me bend not an inch. Not an inch.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up on that point. There's literally nobody out there right now who are saying you cannot wear a mask or you cannot get a vaccine or you cannot get a booster. There is literally nobody who walks into a store or a restaurant or any sort of business wearing a mask who's told you must take that off. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you want to get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If you don't. What is I do not understand, fundamentally do not understand. I consider myself moderately educated, moderately articulate, but I fundamentally do not understand what the problem is. Why can't people make these decisions which are in their own best medical and personal interests? I fundamentally don't understand how we got to this point, how we've allowed it to get to this point, and how we can continue to go down this road. Do either of you? I don't. I certainly don't.
It's step by step. It's every time you let them take a little bit, and then you find yourself out the door or across the field. I stood up last time. I'm standing up this time. We just can't let them take anymore. If we do that as a group, we win.
Wow. And
that's the truth.
And what we have at stake here is nothing less than our own self-determination. They are attempting to achieve the impossible, which is a risk-free world. Zero
Correct.
deaths, zero
Never going to happen.
And the irony here is that we're closer to ever than actually achieving some sort of natural fix, if you will. Closer than ever. And yet they would shut us down. And great. We can go back to having our groceries delivered. We can go back to literally sitting in drive-through through an hour so we don't risk seeing anyone. Where does and when does it all end? The question was asked at what point, and they refuse. They refuse to establish a benchmark, a bogey, a point, a line in the sand. They refuse to give us a goal that says when we achieve this, it will all be over. And yet,
because once they say that, they're bound to it.
Right. And yet they are.
In the past, they gave us benchmarks and goals. In the past, we just got to pause. We just got to bend the curve, get over the curve. We just got to get a vaccine. We just got to get 70% of the vaccine available. Now we got to be 99% compliant. They've
2
had
weeks to
goals
flatten
before.
the
They've given
curve.
benchmarks. They just don't. They don't hold. They don't hold to their benchmarks. They don't hold to their suggestions and ideas. It's always changing. It's a moving target.
Because there's nobody to
It's
hold them
not
to
acceptable. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what voting comes for. You gotta start getting more people to vote with their hands at the ballot box and make changes. But it's a shame. People, what I do see now, though, as I see more people, on all different sides, all different political sides, that don't like these mandates, that think they're ridiculous. It's not the left, it's not the right, it's not the center. It's all. There's just not enough people standing up and fighting against it. They're saying it in the background. And I was in a bank today, and there wasn't one person in there that was working that was for this. I had the phone on with the conference going on. There wasn't anybody that was for it. So for them to stand up and think they're going to get mass compliance, they don't have mass compliance. They might think they are. Maybe the people in that room are all talking about how they will comply with one another, and follow these ridiculous rules. But I don't think they have mass compliance coming from the people. If anything, maybe this can be the one straw that breaks the camel's back. This is the final thing that people just go, you know what? We're not dealing with this. Sort of like that $3,000 that we were going to give people to go get vaccine shots that all of a sudden they had to pull back on. Maybe this is one of those things where on Monday, maybe on Tuesday, they'll have another press conference and be, sorry, we actually made a mistake here. Let's
in the words of Emily Latella, never mind. Well, and here's the point made by several. If this was so urgent, why are we waiting until Monday?
Why not today? If it's
Right
so
now.
urgent, why not do it today? Like right now, like you guys should have your mask on. You guys are too close in this video.
Oh my! Monday's going to be illuminating. I think at that point in time, the entire state will know if my social media director, that's me, Brood, I've told you before, Brood Awakening, your locations are an oasis. And I used to say a business oasis, but I'll call it an oasis of sanity. How many times have I gone to the Providence location for coffee and then closed the place?
Yeah.
A few. Because when you walk into your business, you've got the option to engage in a political conversation, but there's no pressure. You've got the option to mask or behave in a socially distant manner, but there's no pressure. You walk in comfortably right away because of the cleanliness of the location. You take ServSafe as a basis and just blow up from there. Just how you handle food, quite frankly, it's astonishing the work that folks do, because very often your staffing levels are, you've got people there who have a constant smile on their face despite doing the work sometimes of 2 or 3 people, because of all the challenges all employers face. You're continually stocked. I haven't gone in there where you haven't been able to manage to put exactly what I wanted together in a matter of minutes with high quality products. Maybe businesses should be allowed to do everything that you do, Dave, and then be left the hell alone. The state can come by for their protection money, once a week or once a month whenever you have to file it electronically. Because that's what it is, right? I mean, can we spare us the notion that we live in a society of shared sacrifice? Because it certainly isn't happening at the state level. The state comes by, you mail them your protection money once a month, and then they leave you alone. As long as you keep making paying the VIG, right? So
keep making the drops.
Watch
Keep making the drops,
Dave.
Is that funny?
Watch your kneecaps.
Well, listen, I'm a fighter. I'm not going down. I'm not bullied. I'm not intimidated by anybody. And I welcome the challenge if it has to be. It's just a shame. It's a shame that these guys don't get it. You mentioned about shared sacrifice. Who's up there sacrificing? Who's taking the shared sacrifice up there? Are they losing their businesses? Are they losing their jobs? Are they having to get up at 4 in the morning and go in? It's not happening.
Nope. Everybody I know who
Certainly
runs a
nobody at
business is exhausted at this point, present company included, just exhausted.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's not just the business owner, Pat. It's the hardworking employees that we have that didn't have off for 2 years, like some people collecting and doing nothing. They had to get up every day and work harder than they normally had to, and then deal with the BS that was dealt by a lot of people, because they didn't like what was going on, or that things were taking too long, or mistakes were being made, or we're short staffed on a particular day. I got staff that are just tired. It's almost like some of them you gotta come on, hang in there, don't leave now, stay in a little bit longer. How much longer can that go? While we were having this conversation, one of my employees said, "Really? Monday? Mask? I don't think I'm coming in." I replied, "Doesn't happen, Bert." And what I say, they put a nice little hand thing together. "See you on Monday." They don't want to deal with this stuff. I'm going to start battling and start losing more employees.
yeah, I mean, restaurant work is
untenable
demanding
position.
physical work. Can be very rewarding. You can learn amazing skills. I can think of no better industry where someone can start from scratch and end up years later with their own businesses. But adding this extra burden on them, this extra responsibility on them, for many is just it's the straw. I think ultimately, because my next question is going to be to both of you, I think ultimately we end up going down a dark road for a little while, and then we recover. Because my question is, what are in both of you gentlemen's minds, you're both involved in the political cycle. You're in the bubble. You deal with politicians, or you're seeking to become one. What do you think the impact is going to be on this in terms of elections and in terms of the political structure in this state?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think people have had enough. From what I've heard from people, I think they've had enough, and I see it across the political spectrum, just like Dave has. And I don't think that they want to hang in there any longer at this point. I do think even in a state like Rhode Island, as many problems as we have, that this has the capability to tip the political winds in a different direction. And that's essentially why I'm running for the Attorney General's office, as I think that this is one of those situations that transcends politics. I don't want to be a politician, so to speak. I want to do the job for the people of the state of Rhode Island, and I think that this particular type of situation is going to help people wake up and realize, hey, wait a minute. We do need a real check and balance on what the government is doing, because right now we don't have one.
Oh.
I agree. Checks and balances need to be in there. I also see and hear a lot of movement from people that they're tired, they're fed up. In the past, when you didn't have this pandemic and somebody didn't like the political scene, they may have screamed, they may have squawked, but it didn't affect them. There wasn't pain in their pocket, a financial disadvantage or inconvenience. So I don't think people made the right choices, or they didn't make a choice at all, or just ignored it. Now, everybody's being affected by this. Their friends are being affected. Their families are being affected. The normal things that they like to do. If somebody wants to come out and read a book or have a cup of coffee or go, sit and have dinner somewhere. They're all being affected. And they know why. So I think you're going to see people voting differently, a lot differently. And I think you're going to see a lot of changes. If there's any time for someone to jump in any field, any race, Chaz, like you're doing, now's the time. Now's the time to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be more candidates out there doing it.
Well, Chaz, take us home.
Agree.
As I like to say, take us home.
Yeah, I appreciate both of you with the conversation tonight. I think we had some excellent perspective on what's going on here in the state of Rhode Island. Dave, if you want to tell us a little bit about where everyone can find you and some of the locations and what's going on over at the business, I'll let you do that, and then I'll sign off at the end.
And I got a quick dive
Sounds
in for a quick
good.
promo after Dave is done. But Dave, go ahead, buddy.
Sounds good. Well, guys, I want to thank you for having me on. Great show as always. Well, we got 5 locations. We're all open right now. Monday through Friday at every single store. Saturday and Sunday at 3 of our locations: Cherry Hill, Cranston, and Warwick. We got 3 locations that have full liquor licenses. You come down and have an espresso martini or a glass of wine with your sandwich or your pastry or dessert. Newest store is in Providence, Rhode Island, 100 Westminster Street. Come down and visit us. You often see Pat Ford hanging around there talking to people, like he said, closing the joint. It's a great place. And that's it. I want to thank everybody for their time and support. And thanks again, Chaz and Pat, for having me.
And I want to throw in 2 things. There is going to be an event tomorrow night at a Brood Awakenings location. And Chaz, why don't you talk about that for a minute and then come back to me, because I've got one other thing to mention.
Absolutely. I'll be at Brood Awakenings, Warwick tomorrow. It's 1316 Bald Hill Road. Is that right address? 1316 Bald Hill Road, Warwick, Rhode Island, from 6 to 8 p.m. Stop in, come see me, patronize the business, have yourself a drink. And feel free to ask me my vision for what the Office of the Attorney General will look like under a Calenda administration, because it will certainly look a lot different under my vision than it will look under the current Attorney General's vision, which most people don't even know who he is, but that's okay. We're gonna make sure that he's not there after 2022.
There you go. And
come down, support Chaz. It's a fundraiser. Make a little donation to him and his campaign, and help us out.
And if I can make a little promotion, we've got merch, by the way, folks. And you can go to facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and we've got a promotion going on. It starts at about 1 in the morning. This is from the manufacturer. 10% off on all our merch. The gift of love this holiday season is, in fact, a Buddy Tianci t-shirt from the Coalition Radio Network. Of course, you can find our links either at my Facebook page or go to the facebook.com/The Coalition Radio and get a hoodie, get a shirt. It does a couple things. It helps us keep the doors open as we work hard to ask the questions that it's apparent that no one else wants to. But it also, nothing gives a outstretched middle finger to the establishment that's caused shows like today than wearing a shirt that amplifies your support of independent media. It's quite honestly, excuse my language for a moment, it's the shirt that says fuck you. So, not literally, but the point is very well made. So you can find our merch link at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. And if you could like our page while you're there, we'd be grateful. All of the broadcasts that we do of all our shows, we do 6 original broadcasts a week in addition to news coverage here. We think we're on the path to starting something big, a real revolution in Rhode Island media. These are all local shows with the exception of our wonderful Power and Policy show, which, by the way, can, depending on the week, can emanate from Brooklyn, or a couple weeks ago, it was actually from a hotel in Casablanca. So we never know where Irina is going to be, but ultimately, our station, our shows, our people have their roots right here in Little Rhodey. We love this place, but at the same time, you can love something and understand that its need for fundamental change. Sadly, this state is broken right now, not because of the fault of anyone listening, not because of the fault of people like Dave and Chaz, who work so hard in individual businesses to create wealth, not just for themselves, but for their employees, their coworkers, their friends, their vendors. So many people in the state do the right thing. The tragedy here is that our leadership is morally, philosophically, financially bankrupt. And that's what needs to change. We don't need new taxes. We don't need more programs. We don't need more cute analogies that start with somehow with the road. in there, built in there. We don't need Rhode Island 2030. Don't need road safe. We don't need any of this nonsense. We just need to let Rhode Islanders do what we do best, which is live, love, share, work. Chaz, thanks again for doing this every week. Really grateful for the opportunity.
No, absolutely.
To work with both of you. Take us home,
Absolutely.
buddy.
I echo those points, and I appreciate everybody tuning in as usual on Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, on Wednesday nights here on the Coalition Radio Network. As I mentioned, I'm Chaz Calenda. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Inman and Torgy, 1500 Nooseneck Hill Road in Coventry, Rhode Island, 823-9200. You can find me there for my legal services. And for those of you interested in my campaign to be the next Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island, you can find me at CHAS, C-H-A-S, 4ag.com, where you can read up on me and all my positions on what I believe the Office of the Attorney General should look at. And don't forget to come to Brood Awakenings tomorrow night in Warwick and check out the fundraiser that we're going to have there. So again, thank you all for joining us here on the Coalition Radio Network. Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, and we'll see you on the next edition. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Pat, and everybody have a good night.